Today on Doomed! Deradicalization or Nazi punching? This was the cause for some big debate online over the past few weeks. So today, on this episode of Doomed, I, Matt Binder, am going to listen to the interview with you all between Briahna Joy Gray and excuse me, I had a frog in my throat. Is that the phrase? Anyway, Briahna Joy Gray and Talia Lavin. And I'll listen to that interview, and we'll talk, we'll discuss, we'll have a fruitful conversation about deradicalization and Nazi punching versus Nazi punching. Is it versus? Is it either or? Is it both? We'll talk about all that. Let me get to the, let me pull myself up on the screen here. Here I am. Now, I was planning on doing a little bit of, as Sam Cedar, the majority report, would say, a little bit of housekeeping. I was planning on doing a special bonus episode this week, in addition to the regular episode of Doomed, which usually airs on Thursdays. Right now, I'm airing on Wednesday. And I realized that I'm going to be unavailable this Thursday. So what I'm doing is I'm taking that bonus that was supposed to be, and we're turning it into a full-fledged episode. And then next week, you'll get the full-fledged episode on Thursday, plus a bonus. Maybe I'll even do something over the next few days. I said this last week, but you got to bear with me. Follow me on Twitter at Matt Binder. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Matt Binder. And I will keep you in line with what I'm doing. Just like with this episode where I literally put out the heads up to all of you in like the past 30 minutes that I was going live. But anyway, sorry for all that, but it is what it is. So again, if you're watching live, this is the show for today. This is the show for this week. No show Thursday, but if you're not watching live, no difference. This episode's going to go up. We'll be back next week with guests, like I usually do for the interview. Also, something else to talk about. I was demonetized on YouTube this week. Why was I demonetized? Because YouTube has a policy. Actually, I should be, maybe I should milk it a little bit. I'm being censored. I am a brave truth teller, a dangerous truth teller, and the powers that be at YouTube or Google or Alphabet Inc. cannot take me wielding the sword of truth. I'm just too dangerous, just too powerful. So they're censoring me by stripping me of my monetization powers. You may notice that you cannot leave a super chat. That's right. No super chats today. You cannot leave a super chat. Excuse me, I needed a drink. This demonetization is really, parched me. No super chats. I will be down a couple $100 this month thanks to this demonetization. And yeah. Ryan Lennon fan in the chat, because it's not a super chat, in the YouTube chat asks, I wonder what it was, the horse paste memes? Here it is. I'm going to be truthful to you guys. The idea that, I'm not one of those contrarians that needs to peg every single thing that happens to me by a big tech company as some sort of issue of censorship, issue of the big man holding the little man down. What happened is YouTube has a policy where if you want to be monetized, you must create completely original content. You cannot reuse other people's content. This is not you might be going, oh, copyright issue is what had happened. Copyright issue is a big issue. Copyright problem is a big issue on YouTube, especially people claiming copyright on items they actually do not own, and that happens a lot. That's not what happened here. This has nothing to do with copyright. This policy covers people who even get permission to upload other people's things onto their channel. Basically, it's just a policy that you need to have 100% original content, and not just reusing other people's stuff that's already on other channels. Now you'd be maybe wondering, Matt, you just basically do a live stream, which is yourself on camera, occasionally airing clips, which you remain on screen for and pause and add a commentary, which would be considered fair use. But the majority of this is you, maybe a guest, but it's your footage, completely original. And to that I say, yes, I agree. YouTube's automated systems have somehow flagged me as not having original content. So, thus, I've been demonetized. YouTube has reached out to me and has asked me to upload a video to explain how I create my content so they could take a look. I will be doing that. It's quite ridiculous I need to do that when they could just literally look at this live stream episode right here, right now, and see this is how I create all my content. It's either the live stream or I will cut a portion from the live stream, like a 10, 15, maybe 20-minute portion from the live stream that I feel could be a standalone segment. And I will upload that so it doesn't get lost within a long form, Matt Binder classic 2, 3, 4+ hour stream. But yeah, that's why I will be making $0 off YouTube for the next couple of weeks. I will receive no revenue from any ads, which doesn't really make me that much. The ads don't really make me that much on this channel. But no super chats either, and that is a hit. I would say I make anywhere from 2, 3, maybe on a very good month, $400 from super chats. A month. Again, not big money. I'm not going to go broke from it, but I'm also a worker, a working class individual who lives fairly paycheck to paycheck. And a couple $100 is a big loss nonetheless. So that sucks. But it is what it is. It has nothing to do with YouTube censoring me. It has to do with completely arbitrary, non-political terms of service. And the real issue here, in my estimation, that we should be focused on is YouTube has dumb automated systems that flag content that don't fit YouTube's policies all the time. And YouTube is ridiculously slow to address them. If there's any issue here, maybe you could make a case that it shows how YouTube focuses on the upper echelon of creators. I'm sure if a big creator with millions of subscribers got flagged for this and were going to be out there multiple thousands of dollars in revenue, this would be solved fairly quickly, if not the same day. I would be surprised to see it not happen the same day. But for smaller creators such as myself, we have to send them videos and be put under a process to get ourselves remonetized, even though it is their fault and we did nothing to get ourselves demonetized. It is what it is. So if you usually give, if you usually give super chats, if you usually support this show by watching the YouTube clips, of course, keep watching YouTube clips. When the super chats come back, keep dropping those super chats if that's what you prefer. But it shows that, can't depend on YouTube for a steady income. At least not until this channel gets bigger and YouTube feels a loss themselves when my channel gets demonetized. And so that means they would do something about it quickly. So to support this show, the best way to do so right now is to go to patreon.com/MattBinder. I've had no issues with Patreon. The only time your payments have ever not gone through is when your payment has been declined due to credit card issues or whatnot. And Patreon does a very good job at trying to, let you know, and then trying to recharge your credit card, seeing if you fix the issues. So yeah, patreon.com/MattBinder. I've had no issues with them. That's the best way to support this show. Recurring $5 subscription. If you can, you could give less, you could give more. You will get the bonus uh, content, which right now is basically the audio of the second half of this program. Eventually, very soon, I feel like we're getting to a high enough number where it would make sense. There's enough patrons where, to me, it would make sense to just give them content. Because at first I didn't want to create content that just a few, a handful of people can enjoy, when I could use that content to basically put more stuff out to get publicity for the show, and get more content out there. But we're getting to a point where I think there's enough people we can give exclusive stuff to very soon. So patreon.com/MattBinder. It's the best way to support this show right now. Without any further ado, let's get to the topic of this program. Deradicalization versus punching Nazis. Now, this caused lots of, controversy. Big brouhaha on Twitter over the past couple of weeks. Basically, Briahna Joy Gray, formerly Bernie Sanders' 2020 presidential campaign press secretary. She has a podcast called Bad Faith. It was originally a show with Virgil Texas, formerly of Chapo Trap House. Virgil has not been on the program for a while for reasons that I are unclear to me. Apparently, there have been allegations against him. I've not been on the up and up. I worked with Virgil for a short time at Cafe. He seemed like a good person. Good dude, smart guy. But I've read. I haven't found the allegations. If someone wants to send them to me, I'll be happy to take a look. I read a summary somewhere, and if true, not good, bad for him. And unfortunate that that young woman had to go through that. But anyway, so Briahna Joy Gray, of formerly Bernie Sanders' press secretary for his 2020 presidential campaign, has this show called Bad Faith. It's a podcast, and she had Talia Lavin on the show. I'm sorry if I mispronounced her last name. Both Talia and Briahna have been on this show before. It's been a while for both of them. Both great guests. Both of them are, were great. Talking about the topics that I had them on this show. I follow both of them on Twitter. Fans of their work over the years. Briahna was on this show to talk about the various fake stories that were being pushed out by Bernie Sanders haters, misinformation about Bernie Sanders. This was in 2018, though, before the 2020 campaign, before she worked for Bernie. And Talia was on this show to talk about white supremacy. I have to have Talia back on this show because I've not had her on to talk about her book, which is why she went on Briahna's show. But I just want to put up front, I am going to focus on the topic here. Will I criticize either individual at some point? Yes, but it will be within the realm of this discussion. There will be no discussion of the personal things that happened on Twitter between the two. And I have, it's just not relevant to what I think is the big picture here. Obviously that discussion will come into play, but, the actual, attacks online between the two of them that go beyond the topic, I'm not really going to talk about much, if at all. So let's get into this. I have the clip. I don't have the full clip. Bad Faith puts half the show beyond the paywall. I just am going to watch on this public episode the half of the show that Briahna put online for free. We will watch that. I will stop it many times, commentate on it. We will discuss. And without any further ado, here is the clip from Bad Faith between Briahna and Talia on deradicalization versus punching Nazis. Let's do this.
The way to get out of this mess and the way to resolve the political balkanization and the rise of right-wing extremism is going to require a deprogramming that is not going to, it's going to require a broader deprogramming that accesses the core of what's driving people into these communities at higher and higher rates, right? And that it's not necessarily going to be about saying you're racist and you're bad, even if that's 100% true. But that it's going to be about figuring out what compels an individual to find more solace in white supremacy than another kind of community. And so I wonder, I wonder what your thoughts are on that as a leftist. You know, is there an incompatibility with wanting to do have a broad multiracial coalition and a kind of insistence? I mean, you're dealing with a really narrow extreme part of the country. So I don't want to say that every conservative or every Trump voter is implicated in this conversation. But, you know, do you ever feel like there's a tension between kind of the need to coalition build and a perception of a certain segment of society as kind of untouchable?
I don't feel that tension. I understand that other people do. I'm in the Punch a Nazi School of Applied Mechanics. I have no sympathy for these people. And it's not just at a personal peak, you know, because people talk about deprogramming, deradicalization. Every time I give a book talk, 4 or 5 of the questions are about can't we just kumbaya, de-radicalize? And you have no idea what goes into de-radicalization. Genuinely, de-radicalization, this magical term that people use constantly, is a years-long process, requires, people to be mentally ready to leave. It's analogous to quitting smoking. It's fucking hard.
So let's get this straight right off the bat. It seems like there, and from what I understand, this conversation, the reason Talia had an issue with it is because she did not think this is where the conversation was going to go. Now, Talia has a book that came out called Culture Warlords. Basically, it's about her undercover investigative work where she went undercover within white supremacist online circles for a year and a half and her experience with that. She is a Jewish woman, and she has, for a long time, has covered the far right and white supremacists and neo-Nazis. And she thought that this apparently was just going to be a conversation about the topic of her book. And Briahna brought in the conversation about de-radicalization. I don't have an issue with that, honestly. I think that conversation can very well take part in the broader context of, talking about white supremacy, to be quite frank. It's part of that conversation. I know that she was unhappy with where this conversation went. That's her personal feelings on the matter. I think, so far, I think they're both talking about two separate things, though. Briahna is clearly talking about, from a standpoint of, leftist organizing, trying to basically grow a coalition on the left, obviously, so it ends up working out via electoral politics as well, but also probably with mutual aid and other various activism, and other direct action. Talia is looking at this from the perspective of, de-radicalization of an individual. I think both, they're really two different conversations, but they overlap. But clearly, I think if one person's coming at it from one side and the other person's coming at it from the other angle, there's not going to be, they're basically not talking about the same thing. Let's keep playing. I'll get deeper into what I'm talking about, but I know they're about to bring something up which will roll into it all.
Sometimes people might want to kill you for leaving, and so you have to be really fucking ready to leave. And most people don't want to. They enjoy it. They enjoy the cruelty. They enjoy the camaraderie. They feel community. They feel acceptance, right? So I think, so if you're willing to engage in a years-long emotional connection of extraordinary strength to the point where I've heard of like people marrying their de-radicalizers or spending years having dinner with their de-radicalizers only to like eventually maybe arrive at a sort of tenuous former status. If you're prepared to do that, fine. That's not scalable. What is scalable is saying like these sentiments are unacceptable. You cannot show up in my town. You cannot show up in my university. I think that many people want to kumbaya because for them, the prospect of like standing up and like fucking punching a Proud Boy is uncomfortable. And they want to see themselves as more tolerant. And like, I mean, for me at least, I'm like, cool, your conception of yourself as tolerant and marketplace of ideas-y and willing to coalition build, whatever, like matters more to you than my safety and the safety of like all the marginalized people that these people attack. Like I really, if I sound angry, it's because I'm an angry person. I'm also quitting smoking and also fuck a Nazi. Like fuck them.
Okay,
I don't care about them. I don't care about their lives. I want them to die. Like
listen, Talia, her points about de-radicalization and the process and how it's not scalable are spot on. And I want to be straight up here. People who listen to the show know that a major topic on this program, Doomed with Matt Binder, a major topic is discussing de-radicalization. I've done multiple episodes on it. We've discussed it in the throughout the program with listeners, callers. I am a advocate for debates, online debates, because I feel like anything you can do to pull people out from the right and far right extremist circles, white supremacy, neo-Nazis, is a positive. And I personally have heard from people. And I know the Majority Report, where I first started working, where I'm a regular weekly co-host now. We've heard from people, listeners, and not a small number either, who've reached out and said, "Listen, your show, what you guys do, has helped pull me out of the far right rabbit hole I was going down." And so I think de-radicalization can be very powerful. And I frequently talk about what is the point of engaging in some of these discussions if you don't have de-radicalization in mind. I always take that as, and I don't know if I've ever been clear about it, but I want to be clear now. I have always looked at it as a 100% personal endeavor. In terms of like how scalable it is. I look at it as, if I can de-radicalize somebody or work in some way, I'm not going to take all the credit. Obviously, there's a lot more, I think, that goes on than just their favorite YouTube or whatever. They play a part, but obviously things in their personal family life, their friends, their real offline life plays a much bigger part. But, to sort of help that person down the road away from that far right rabbit hole is extremely important in basically helping get that person's life back to them, their friends, their family members. I can't claim, I'm not saying like, oh, I care about, on a personal level, like I don't know these people, but it does seem important that, people lose family members, lose mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, whatever. And they can get them back when they are de-radicalized. And that's super important to me. To be able to know that there's, life brought back to somebody, whereas they could have lived this horrific, hateful existence and possibly done something that landed them in prison for the rest of their life. That's important. But the idea that de-radicalization can be done on some sort of level for winning them over for a broad, leftist coalition. I have never advocated for that. I've never talked about that within the possibility of de-radicalization. You can't. You can't. You're going to you're going to spend that time on a handful of people when, to get them on your side, and for what? For what? It's just not, you're not going to, the numbers are just not going to matter. Again, de-radicalization on a level of like saving somebody's life, super important. A well worthwhile cause if that's what you want to do. But to think that doing that is going to somehow build the left, equal some sort of electoral victories down the line, I think you're kidding yourself. You're kidding yourself.
Yeah, just like I have no patience. No patience.
Talia,
and the more we socially marginalize these views, the more we make them unacceptable, the fewer people will join. If you deplatform someone, if you play whack-a-mole enough, like you make it annoying and difficult, you dox people, you get them their jobs lost for holding these views publicly, for saying that they want to burn Jews and kill, N-words. You make it socially absolutely poison to do these things.
So is there evidence of that, Talia?
Is absolutely evidence of that based on everything we've seen from on-the-ground white supremacist organizations and neo-Nazis since 2017 when Trump got voted into office. I mean, you can even go further back to 2015, 2016 when Trump announced his presidency and gave these guys his presidential campaign, I should say, and gave these guys a microphone and the cojones to step out from the shadows in their secret, in-home meetings and allowing them to march in the streets in the numbers they did. We have seen that. Just look at their numbers dwindle from 2017 when I feel like they were at their peak in the streets to now. There's still obviously a big quote unquote war raging, especially in the Northwest, specifically with like Proud Boys and 3%ers, like Patriot Prayer types. We'll monitor where that goes, but the numbers have greatly dwindled. Look at Charlottesville. Look what happened after Charlottesville. They got overzealous. They were met by a huge anti-fascist counter-protest. They were probably the biggest clashes between fascists and anti-fascists there's been in quite some time at Charlottesville. And it got so heated, a fascist got in his car, rammed a bunch of protesters, killing a woman. And they basically have not been able to show their faces since in those numbers. Every time there's been something going on, the anti-fascist counter-protesting to them have been so big they've had to question whether it's worth it. And every time it gets smaller and smaller. I mean, the evidence could not be any clearer. I mean, Richard Spencer became a joke, starting with the punch in the face, the punch heard round the world at the Trump inauguration protests, and then leading into Charlottesville a couple months later. I mean, he's become a joke. His organization is broke, I believe. Milo Yiannopoulos has become a joke. Baked Alaska is a joke. The Proud Boys, again, except for certain chapters that seem to mainly be focused in the northwestern part of this country, they've become a joke. Gavin McInnes doesn't show his face anymore.
That approach, because you say that the approach you're describing is scalable, and the deradicalization approach isn't. But what strikes me is that it seems like there has been a radicalization approach that has been taking years. The radicalizers are happy to take years and pursue this project, and that they have been able to scale it at a significant degree. That in some ways, and we've talked about the Powell memo on the show a lot, but it's this, famous memo by soon-to-be Supreme Court Justice Lewis Powell, where he set out an agenda for the Conservative Party in the 1970s and said, well, look, we're losing the culture wars. This is how we fix it. And it was 30 years before Fox News, which was one of the goals of the Powell memo, a right-wing news organization, manifested. And, we're just now seeing the apotheosis of their efforts to take the Supreme Court and all of this stuff, right? And that there is a way that the long game, I think, while frustrating and not as instantly gratifying, is very effective. On the other hand, I'm concerned about what it means to say something like, we don't let them into our towns, we don't let them into our universities. Just on a logistical level, I don't know what that even begins to look like. And so I am skeptical about the idea that in and of itself could be scalable.
You're completely entitled to your skepticism.
I'm not quite sure what she's trying to say here. Is she claiming that there's some sort of state action that anti-fascists advocate for? That's not the case. It's scalable because we've seen it. We've seen the numbers come out when there are these white supremacist marches or rallies or events in public spaces. We've seen religious figures, clergy come out. We've seen anti-racist groups come out. We've seen anti-fascist groups come out, specifically see people who identify as Antifa. We've seen Black Bloc come out, anarchists, leftists, socialists. The DSA comes out. I mean, it seems pretty scalable to me, and we see these folks come out and meet these fascist events in the streets.
I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. Like, the Lavin memo then is a 30-year-long plan of fuck like racism and make it unacceptable, make it pariah, make it like throw it onto an island and an ice flow, and do
what
that
does it look
through physical violence and through everything from physical violence to doxing to public protest. You use every tool at your disposal. And no, I have no interest. I have no interest in building a coalition with these people.
I agree. We've seen all of these things, from doxing to protests, be very successful and very effective. And again, this is activists doing the work, which they're free to do, just like the Nazis and white supremacists are free to go out and have their marches and rallies, right? The state's not stopping them. I mean, this works because you can see the results, because that's what has been being done for years now.
You may, but the less attractive you can make these ideas seem, to bring back the smoking, analogy. Fewer people smoke because you can't smoke in a movie theater. Fewer people smoke because you can't smoke in a bar. Fewer people smoke because you have to stand on a street corner and feel like shit. So
it's true. It's honestly true. The local laws, I'm in New York City, so I can tell you from the New York City example. When New York City banned smoking indoors, that did tons more than all of the Surgeon General warnings and all of the anti-drug, commercials and anti-smoking ads and PSAs that went out over the years. Once it no longer became a sociable thing to do, once society looked at this as not something it really wanted to be around, people, or at least a lot of people, most people, decided it really wasn't worth their time.
Let's make it like that.
What was it that made you, at this point, decide to quit smoking?
I've been running, and I wanted to be able to run more.
So it wasn't that people kind of harangued you and said smoking is bad.
Oh, that helped. That helped.
No, but even Talia's example of her own, it makes complete sense. She wanted to do more activities that smoking inhibits. The idea that other runners would look down, other people in the athletic or exercising or whatever community, the running community, would look down upon that, would prohibit Talia from taking part in that community. If she was to even just ask somebody, hey, I want to run more, bring my mileage up or steps up or whatever it is. I'm not a runner, so excuse me if I'm getting the terminologies wrong, but follow me here, folks. What can I do? And the runners in this online community said, hey, do you smoke? And she said, yes. I mean, they would say, well, there's your problem. You need to quit smoking to up your running capabilities. I mean...
But I presume that people have been saying that sort of thing since whatever it was you started smoking. It's bad for your health, blah, blah, blah.
I mean, listen, like, I don't think that I'm going to be able to convince you. I think if you want to, like, hold hands with a, Nazi and kiss them gently on the cheek, that's fine. I just don't think that's going to work out well for you.
Do you think that what I'm arguing for is that I Briahna Joy Gray, who was sitting before you as a Black woman, wants to hold hands with Nazis and kiss them in the street?
I have a problem with this part. First of all, do I think Briahna is a Nazi? No. Do I think Talia was calling Briahna a Nazi? No. She's clearly using the example of people who are advocating to work with Nazis. She's saying, you're trying to do the kumbaya thing with them, right? It's the same thing she's saying, just in a different way. But here's my problem with this. Very bizarre to see somebody like Briahna using identity here, because we know that being a Black woman in 2021 in the current political sphere we are in actually does not really mean explicitly that you will be anti-far-right extremism. I mean, the idea that a person of color is by default anti-racist or anti-fascist is not true, as we know, in the current modern day version of fascism. We've seen people in the LGBT community, white supremacists, neo-Nazis. We've seen Black women, such as Candace Owens. Let's use the terminology Talia used. Hold hands and kiss a Nazi on the cheek. She's literally out there with Larry Elder talking about how if we gave reparations to descendants of slaves, why aren't we also not giving reparations to descendants of slave owners? They lost their property, didn't they? This was literally a recent conversation between Candace Owens, a Black woman, and Larry Elder, a Black man. Enrique Tarrio is the leader of the current premier white supremacist, at least in the streets, at least visibility-wise, white supremacist organization, the Proud Boys. the group that helped lead the Capitol riots on January 6th, the group that is terrorizing the northwest of this country with what seems like almost weekly now marches where they're just attacking members of the community wherever they may be. I mean, this is a extreme, like, again, I don't think Briahna is a Nazi. Obviously. I don't even say think. I know Briahna is not a Nazi. But her defense of herself is lazy and just not accurate. There's much better ways to defend yourself of that accusation, which again, I don't think Talia was even accusing her of being. But that ain't it.
I'm not trying to debate you at all here. I'm trying to explore what I think are some tensions that I too am wrestling with. And I would hope that since we're both members of this group, of these groups, that certainly see no benefit in appeasing Nazis, that we can have a conversation that doesn't presume that where we're coming from is because of some natural sympathy with these groups, as opposed to genuinely trying to strategize about how to fix this problem that we very much agree on, which is that America is being increasingly radicalized in these extremist ways.
I feel like I've stated my position.
I don't think that's the problem. Americans are being radicalized in extremist ways. I mean, radicalized how? Are you explicitly talking about right-wing radicalization? I mean, in my estimation, that is a problem. I would say information overload and then misinformation tied in. And I would say that plays a huge role to begin with in bringing people to that. So that would come first to me. Let's continue.
And repeatedly, and then I don't quite know how to react to respond other than like, no, I really believe what I believe. Like, I really think like that stigmatization, that pariah, dumb, that physical confrontation, that, I think people think that they're too cool for anti-fascism. People think anti-fascism is lame.
I think anti-fascism is cool. Cool as hell. I mean, honestly. Antifa is cool.
People think that it's gauche, it's not enough. Yes, of course I believe that like we should have Medicare for all, that we should have social like safety net policies, that we shouldn't like leave people to be deprived, alone, like to feel like these senses of loss and the elements of vulnerability to radicalization are like very common human emotions. Is feeling lost, is feeling lonely, is feeling purposeless, and like everything we can do to mitigate those feelings in such large masses of the population, like that's great. I think there are many constructive things you can do to fight Nazism that don't involve like brass knuckling up and like just flattening the nose of a Proud Boy, but like I think you have to be willing to brass knuckle up and flatten the nose of a Proud Boy too. Like there is no space for coalitional politics with these people, to my mind.
So one of the, I think, parts of the book that I found to be really interesting was when you were talking about how banal many of these individuals were when you were talking to them on the websites, on the dating site, right? And how the banality of their lives was abutting these like really horrific belief systems. And he would go from talking about, casually, oh, I'm making my pork and bean dinner or whatever, to, Jews, let's kill them. Am I right?
Yeah. Or like, let's talk about the, N-words.
Yeah. So I remember when I was, reading that section, you explained that the banality almost made you feel less empathy for these people. Can you talk a little bit about about the kind of emotional reaction you had to being that close and in those intimate spaces and having these people trust you in that way with these incredibly ugly parts of their lives?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, so you'll see so often in journalism about Nazis, this shock that they're people. Like it's there was an infamous sort of New York Times profile of Tony Hoveder, who's a pretty well known white supremacist. It was like, oh my God, like he has a wife and a house and like he made dinner and like he didn't like, I don't know, jizz a swastika onto the wall while making pasta. Like, I mean, it's that level of parodic, like, oh my God, Nazis are people too. And I'm like, of course they're people. You start with the presumption that they're people with whole lives, with moral universes as complex and wild as yours and mine. And like, you start with the assumption that these are ordinary people. And then you see what these ordinary people have dedicated their lives to. And if that doesn't make you fucking mad, it makes me fucking mad.
Yeah, so
I mean, for me, I don't know. Listen, I don't know where this is gonna go. I assume it's not going somewhere good, but I agree with what Talia's perspective here is, and that makes it like worse to me. Like it's not like, oh my God, they're people too. It's that this ordinary person just looks at their hatred the same way. Like it's not something that's like, they're not some like cinema Hollywood-esque caricature. The danger here is they're your next door neighbor. They're your cousin, maybe your brother or sister. You don't know. Family member. I mean, that's the dangerous part. That's the part that does, should make you enraged and want to do something.
It doesn't absolve them. Their humanity doesn't absolve them. Their humanity condemns them further.
So I completely relate to this frustration that folks are shocked about the fact that racists aren't, some separate breed or species that, are easily identified by, tentacles or something. Like I totally relate to that feeling. At the same time, when I was reading your description of these lives, what struck me was not necessarily that they were so average, but there were some ways in which it did feel very atypical. A lot of the guys that you described, you talk at length about the describing the incel movement, the involuntary celibates, that a lot of these men have very little in the way of kind of romantic or social infrastructure in their lives at all. You describe one guy making dinner and that he makes the same kind of, it was kind of a bizarre, very imbalanced meal of like pork and beans or something every single night.
No, it was canned beef and pineapples.
Canned beef. Oh yes, it was beef and like canned beans and then a swig of pineapple juice to break it up, I guess, so he doesn't get scurvy. And I remember reading that and thinking, oh, well, in some ways it's banal because he's like a guy making dinner every night. But in other ways, the details of his life point to someone who is not a functioning member of society and has a lot of other things going on. That led me not to say it absolves him of any way, because there are a lot of poor people who aren't obviously white supremacists. In fact, obviously disproportionately poor people in America are not white at all. But it did, I gotta confess, it did make me not feel empathy for the person, but it made me say, this is a tension point for political radicalization. Like, this is an opportunity to provide something that could lead this person to want to make different kinds of choices. If in fact, part of what's driving him to be a white supremacist are these other aspects of his life that seem very unpleasant and bad and that no one should be dealing with and living like. And I wonder if there was ever, it's difficult because it is difficult to talk about this without feeling like you're letting people off the hook for their loathsome behaviors. But in a practical way, I guess as someone who doesn't see a lot of utility in telling people that they are bad, as changing their mind. Like if I thought it worked to just be like Nazism is horrible and you shouldn't be a Nazi, then I'd be like, yes, we should just put that on every bridge and tunnel in America and that would solve the problem.
I mean, I say we give that a shot. Like, I mean, honestly, like if people showed up en masse every time there was a right-wing march.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but we have already, I feel we've seen the results in when you make this into something that society as a whole looks at as reprehensible. And yes, obviously, society clearly looks at white supremacy and neo-Nazis reprehensible. But if you put it out there face to face, in their face all the time, and you make it so they cannot walk around without someone seeing the paraphernalia they're wearing or walking around with, and then looking at the signs all in their town that show that paraphernalia as something deplorable. I mean,
if people bothered to do that instead of deciding that the pragmatic approach is sympathy for the devil.
Well, are those, well, again, I wouldn't characterize it as sympathy for the devil, but are those things mutually exclusive? Is showing up to a right-wing march the way, Antifa and some groups do? And there are often counter protests. Is that mutually exclusive with saying there needs to be long-term de-radicalizers, people like, Daryl Davis, who we brought up on this podcast many times before, who do engage in that more long-term effort, and people
Daryl Davis is a wonderful person. Daryl Davis is also one man. Shannon Foley Martinez is another example of someone who works with formers. But again, this is not scalable. These are years long, immensely intimate, emotional stuff. I think if you want social policies that make life less of a hideous, precarious ladder over an abyss, fine. But know that every one of these people is going to fight you every step of the way of implementing these policies, because they will go to people of color too.
So why is...
I mean, I've heard so many people, especially when I was talking about, when I was part of the conversation earlier this year after Jimmy Dore had a Boogaloo Boy on his program to espouse pro-Boogaloo Boy rhetoric. And people bringing up folks like Daryl Davis who have done good work in reaching out and basically de-radicalizing individuals. But, Talia hits the nail on the head here. Like, these are individual people who go out and associate with other individuals and work over a long period of time to bring those people out of the KKK or whatever white supremacist organization they're part of. This is not scalable. Also, Daryl Davis is not doing this to organize. Like, he's not doing this to build a leftist coalition. Like, to bring in KKK members. I mean, here, looking right now, Davis eventually went on to befriend over 20 members of the KKK and claims to have been directly responsible for between 40 and 60, and indirectly over 200 people leaving the Klan. Now, indirectly, we don't know. Again, indirectly, we don't know what happened with those people. But directly responsible for between 40 and 60, I mean, that's not scalable. And when we say de-radicalize, we're talking about simply they're not part of the KKK. They left the Klan. That doesn't mean they all of a sudden open their eyes to socialism and become leftists. I mean, they could still be conservatives. They can still be Republicans. They could still vote for the right. And this is someone who's basically dedicated his life to doing this. Years. Just to bring a few dozen people out of the KKK. Again, on a human level, That's incredible, extraordinary. Hopefully, the dozens of people who he helped ended up, living a good life with their family and their friends and people they wouldn't have associated with previously, and they're living a positive existence. But in terms of what Briahna is focusing on, organizing, I just don't see how this works.
Why is it an individual act?
What are you even
Daryl David
advocating for?
Well, let's try to figure that out, Talia. What I'm curious about is why is it an individual act when someone like Daryl Davis does what he does? For those who don't remember, Daryl Davis is a black man who, famously has a number of like Klan robes in his closet, because every time he talks a Klan's member out of being in the Klan, they give him a robe, and he's like the great Klan whisperer. And he's also apparently a very renowned jazz musician. But it's interesting to me to see it as an individual act when it's Daryl Davis, but not an individual act when an individual decides to put brass knuckles on and punch a Nazi.
Well, this is pretty obvious if you ask me. Daryl Davis individually committed to a personal project where he befriended members of the Klan. This wasn't some sort of group effort, as far as I've been concerned, as far as I know about Davis's work. Whereas you don't see a singular individual knuckling up and meeting with the Proud Boys by themselves. Anti-fascist, on the street, counter-protest is a group effort. If one anti-fascist shows up at a Proud Boy event, they ain't going to be able to do anything because it's a communal action. This is so bizarre. I don't understand the question here. It's clear as day to me. Daryl Davis would not have stopped a singular Klan event that he showed up to. Anti-fascist, time and time again, straight up shut down whole neo-Nazi, white supremacist, fascist events because they show up in for a communal effort in numbers.
What I'm questioning is the scalability. The reason I'm questioning it is because I think a lot of people aren't going to feel able or safe to do the Nazi punching, right? So it doesn't seem to me, I would say, why not both? If you are an adherent to Nazi punching, great. Fine. I'm certainly not arguing against that.
I don't think Talia is arguing against that too. I think she is not anti-deradicalization. She's anti-deradicalization as an official effort to broadly destroy a fascist movement. It's like she said over again in this interview, it's just not scalable. You're not going to de-radicalize tens of thousands of people. Hundreds of thousands, honestly, I think, if not millions. And I'm not saying everyone who voted for Trump is in this group, because I don't think that either. I think a lot of people who they're not that political voted for Trump. An easy person to, it's one thing Trump was good at, easy person to get if you're not political and would adhere to, are open to some of the ideas he put out. Not all of them probably, but some of the ideas he put out, because they're simple. They're stupid simple. So if you're not political, you may slightly lean in that direction in some areas. You go out and vote for a presidential election, and then you tap out for the rest of the 4 years, and then you come back for the next presidential election. I think that is probably the majority of the people who vote in general, not just even for Republicans. But I'm this whole interview is baffling to me, because I do think Talia handles herself quite well, which is why I think it's unfortunate that she um, was so outspoken against it being published. Uh, I I I don't think Briahna was um, attacking her or being, uh, you know, over the top. I mean, clearly, I do think she was being antagonizing in order to get uh, good material. It's clear from how she cut things up and posted them and promoted the show and advertised for the show that she reveled in the controversy, which I get it. But I don't think there was really a controversy. I think without that controversy, if you're watching this, you look at Talia, clearly define the positions, and I think she comes out much better in this interview than Briahna does. It's the post interview stuff that I think, and I understand that Talia walks out of the interview at some point. I don't believe it's in this part, the public part of the interview that I have. Clearly, she probably looks bad doing that. But in what I've viewed, the 20 plus minutes we're going to watch right now, we're almost done. I think Talia comes out looking much better than Briahna in terms of explaining her position and advocating for why her position makes sense.
But I am concerned about saying that we want to minimize the potential effects of doing the alternative approach. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about that, Talia, is because you have an exposure to what it's like to be in those spaces and potentially some insights that other folks who haven't engaged in that project don't have. And I'm curious to pick your brain about whether or not, for example, when you're on these dating sites, do you ever engage in any kind of conversations that tried to see what would happen if you raised doubts about being a white supremacist, or, brought up, well, there's this one Black person at work who's okay, and sometimes, what are those kind of conversations like? Happen.
Those conversations incel spaces bar women, like the whitedate.net is whitedate.net. Like, what I'm supposed to write to people who are talking about like the evil Marxists and darkies and say like, actually, like Black people aren't so bad after all. I mean, honestly, if I had known that this was going to be an extended conversation about the utility of deradicalization versus anti-fascism, I would absolutely have not agreed to be on this podcast, because I've gotten this banal question over and over and over again, and I loathe it at this point.
I totally get Talia's position, but I think she's done a great job, and I think the more eyes you could get in front of this, I listen. I come from maybe the complete opposite of Talia on this in terms of messaging. I also enjoy these types of heated sometimes debates and conversations. I get that other people, it's not their thing, but listen, I think she's done a really good job so far in this. So it's unfortunate she feels that way. I also think, Briahna goes at it in a way which I totally understand. It could be frustrating, but I mean, I think she's coming out on top in terms of actual substance.
Like people, like I mean, I understand coalition building and desires, but like I find it that like most people aren't capable of engaging in like with this level of like being in those spaces is fucking like dipping your head in acid. And I did it for a year and a half. I wouldn't ask anyone else to do it. And I wouldn't expose myself to emotional intimacy with those people on a real level, like not through the mask of an avatar. I don't like, I wouldn't, I mean, maybe because I'm a Jew, I wouldn't wind up radicalized in the same way, but like anyone is susceptible to propaganda. Like asking people to like imbibe white supremacist propaganda and engage in emotional intimacy with white supremacists, which is what de-radicalization entails, a deep emotional intimacy of years-long relationships of talking, conversation. And like, yes, that is inherently more personal than a punch in the face. You know, like I've done some crazy shit. Like, I mean, just even after the book, like around the election, I was, you know, undercover and like the 3% Georgia's security force, like walkie-talkie channel. I had a false identity. I had a false face. I did an over an hour long interview. I had a backstory, emotions. I talked to people. You know, it's hard. It's hard to do that. It's fine. But I had a mask. I had the protection of a lie to cover me. If I had just been naked to those sentiments, like I don't know that I would have even gotten through it. Like it was hard enough as it was. Like this stuff is aqua regia. These conversations that take place in Nazi chat rooms, these conversations that take place on these forums are poison. They are poison, and they are perpetual emotion machines of radicalization. So yeah, like maybe, I mean, and if you went in and you said like, hey, like knock it off, don't talk about immigrants that way, you'd just be kicked out, and they'd dox you anyway.
I don't know that that's what I said, Talia, but that characterization aside, I totally understand and would never ask anybody to engage in de-radicalization either. I mean, I've had this conversation in other contexts where, you know, there's a certain strain, for example, of political discourse among a lot of kind of Black liberals that will say, it's not my job to teach you about racism. You know, it's you educate yourself, pick up a book, you know, that kind of lingo, which is fine. It's extremely taxing. I've spent my entire life as a Black woman in predominantly white spaces being called upon to do exactly that. And it is sometimes tiresome. I remember thinking in law school at a certain point, somebody should be paying me a professor's salary instead of asking me to pay the institution because of all the work I'm doing with my classmates after class ends, explaining to them this crap that the teachers in many respects aren't qualified to cover, even though it's directly germane to the material. So I certainly empathize with that. But I also wouldn't ask any individual to engage in a physical altercation with a Nazi. I'm not asking anybody to do anything.
I don't think Talia is asking anyone to do that either. I would never advocate for any specific individual to do something that well, A, they didn't want to do, or B, especially on the highlight this one, that would put their own well-being in harm's way. I don't think Talia is claiming to tell any specific people to do something violent. I think she's just advocating for the fact that that is the most meaningful way to approach the growing white supremacist neo-Nazi movement. I mean, I don't think that is a mischaracterization there from me.
What I'm trying to explore is the potential political utility of different kinds of options and to assess how effective de-radicalization actually is. I'm not making a claim or an argument right now. What I'm trying to do is have a conversation about what the limitations of various approaches are so we as a community can figure out the best way to go forward.
I mean, I am just curious why you would ask a militant anti-fascist to talk about the utility of de-radicalization. This seems like a setup for frustration for both of us.
Well, you know, I certainly...
I disagree there. I think there is utility to the conversation. Do I think Briahna is going about it in the most productive way? No. But I do think there's utility in the conversation. And I do think even militant anti-fascists, I mean, I consider myself to be anti-fascist, obviously. And I think de-radicalization is an important tool. But it is not one to build a movement or to dismantle an entire movement. It's something to address at the individual level.
I'm not intending to frustrate you, and I'm not so frustrated. I mean, I think it's interesting. I'm asking you the questions that naturally arised in my mind when I read your book. Is there some aspect of the book that you would prefer to talk about? I mean, we haven't really talked in detail about what the book actually lays out, so I want to give you an opportunity to tell the audience what you think the biggest takeaway is and why you think that they should read it, what it is in fact about, what your goals were in writing it.
My goal was to make people aware of the perniciousness of the threat, make people aware of some of the ideological bases and the emotional bases that radicalization rests on. My encouragement was specifically to uplift the anti-fascist movement and to encourage people to become active anti-fascists, militant anti-fascists. It is explicitly a book endorsing action of all kinds, including from behind the keyboard and in the streets, to head this radicalization, this radicalized movement of people who want to kill people that look like me and my family and people who look like you and your family, and head them off at the pass and to fight as urgently as they are fighting.
Hey, YouTube, don't.
I think it is so bizarre to focus on bringing right-wingers to the left in order to build a movement or win electorally. It is beyond ridiculous to discuss that as a strategy. There are 80 million non-voters in terms of even the last presidential election. 80 million people did not vote in the 2020 presidential election. 80 million. You can view that as them not being political. You can view that as them not finding a reason to support either Trump or Biden. Whatever the reason may be, 80 million people did not find it necessary to vote in the 2020 presidential election. The largest, the biggest election in United States history in terms of turnout. Both candidates, Biden and Trump, broke records, made history with their vote totals. Biden, most votes for any candidate in the history of the United States. Trump, the most for any Republican candidate. And he would have been most if Biden didn't outdo him in that very same election. 80 million people did not find it necessary to vote in that election. Did not feel inspired to do so, did not care enough to do so. Why you would not engage with them? Look at those 80 million people as, the gold rush, fertile ground to reach out to and bring them into the political sphere, educate them on leftist, socialist ideology, pro-labor, pro-union, anti-racist, anti-fascist ideology. You're basically saying, here's 80 million people who have a clean slate, completely open to anything. And here you have a much smaller portion of that who hate you and everything you stand for. Who are you going to spend time on? And there is this bizarre subsection of people who look at those people on the right and go, I'm going to focus on them. I'm going to even spend a morsel of time on them. Makes no sense. No sense if you're looking at this at a movement building or electoral standpoint. 0 sense. If you care about deradicalization, it's on an individual basis. You see somebody, you see an opening, you want to get them out of there. I think that is an extremely important endeavor. It is a net positive for one less person to be in that hateful world. But you're not going to build a movement doing that. You're just not. This is all I have for this interview. But there's more. And I will play that on the second half of the show. By the way, the second half of the show is patron bonus episode 100. I have done 100 bonus patron only episodes. Live streamers, live stream viewers, you can stick around. No need to leave. You can watch this live. But if you're not catching it live and you want to hear the audio version, you got to become a patron and catch patron bonus 100. Go to patreon.com/MattBinder to support this program. I appreciate any support you can give. I'm going to thank the people who became patrons since the last episode of this show. And then we will jump into more content. So when was the last episode of this show? September 9th, right? So let me go back. Okay, so the latest patron members are Taylor K, Dr. Gus, Chris S, Henry Lewis K, and joining me just now during the program, Nick J and Anthony C. Thank you all for subscribing to the Patreon page, patreon.com/MattBinder. Remember, we were just demonetized by YouTube for a stupid policy infraction that actually is not accurate. This show was wrongly flagged by YouTube's automated systems as using other people's content. All the content on this channel is exactly how you see right now. Me on camera, live streamed, sometimes watching clips in a fair use manner because I'm commentating throughout. I will get that fixed as soon as possible, but that means I will take a hit until it's fixed. So if you could support the show by becoming a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/MattBinder, I greatly appreciate it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/MattBinder. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram at MattBinder. Search me everywhere else, Matt Binder. You'll find me, friend me, like me, whatever. What else? Doomedcast.com for the podcast version of the show. Rate this podcast.com/doomed. Rate this podcast.com/doomed. We'll bring you all the links to where you can leave podcast reviews. Please do so if you can. It's a big help, especially on Apple Podcasts. It's a big help. You can just click the star rating if you want. It also helps to leave a written review if you can, but whatever you prefer. What else? I think that's it for today. Give me a minute to refill my drink, my soda, and I will be back with more. Remember, if you're watching on the live stream, you can stick around. There's more content. I have more clips to show you. If you are not, then and you're not a patron subscriber, then this is where I tell you, see you next time on Doomed. All right, we are back. We're back. Let's jump right in to more of this conversation. Let's keep talking about the deradicalization versus punching Nazis theory. Via this discussion between Briahna and Talia. Now, I think what we just watched was the half clip. What we just watched was the bit of the Bad Faith podcast featuring Briahna Joy Gray that she uploaded to her YouTube channel with Talia Lavin, who wrote Culture Warlords, a book where she talks about infiltrating white supremacist groups online. And this episode created lots of controversy online about de-radicalization versus Nazi punching. And we just watched the interview, and I think the controversy was more so what happened after the interview. Like, I know Talia was upset how the interview went, but we watched it. It was at times a little bit frustrating, but it was an interesting discussion. I think Talia made great points. I think Briahna also kept the conversation going, but there was nothing that really stood out to me, honestly, until Briahna promoted it in a controversial way, and Talia came out and said how she was upset and didn't want it aired. To be fair, if a guest told me they didn't want something aired, I would also, barring specific incidents, I've never had to do it, by the way, but barring specific instances, I should say, I probably would not do it. First of all, the show is live, so it would be hard to do that. And second of all, if you come on this program and I take the time to, I appreciate you taking the time, but if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it. I mean, obviously there are exceptions. But I don't think there was anything in this interview that made it so it should not be published. And I'm saying that as someone who watched it and agreed 100% with the points Talia was making. But here is where I think, besides the online Twitter stuff, which I think was a little bit too personal for me to really get into because I want to keep with the topic at hand, the broader issue. This is where I thought Briahna overstepped here, for sure. She apparently created a follow-up clip after the interview. It seems like it was to set up the clip. I don't know if she put it before the interview on the podcast or after, but it was a discussion, like an after-interview discussion of the interview. Listen, on the majority report, when I was there, Sam Cedar would do that all the time. I typically don't really do that unless we continue talking about the specific topic. But in terms of like talking about the guest or the guests, that usually is not something I do on this show. But it's not out of the ordinary. But the way Briahna did it, I mean, it was just bizarre. Let's play this clip. Give me a second. All right, so here is the interview that we were just listening to. 1 second. And here is the pre or post game discussion of the Briahna Talia interview on Bad Faith from Briahna. I forgot to turn the audio up. 1 second.
It is frustrating because I do think that I was holding back, frankly, from saying some things that I do believe, which is that I do think that some of the way that white people approach race, and some Black people, frankly, a lot of affluent Black people, is performative.
That's true. That's very true. I don't know where this is going in the context of Talia, because that doesn't sound like her whatsoever. But that is in itself true. In and of itself, I should say, true.
I think that some of the anger, like, there's no reason why someone like Talia should be more angry at a Nazi than me.
This is a statement. This is quite the statement. I mean, Talia is a Jewish woman. And from reading her posts over the years, she had family who were greatly affected by Nazis and the Holocaust and what was going on in Europe at the time. I believe she had family members who lost their lives. I don't understand how you could say that. I don't understand how you can say that. I mean, I have also dedicated a large portion of my work to covering the far right and white supremacy. Do I benefit from white privilege? Absolutely. I also have a Jewish background. I have family that were affected by World War II. My grandfather fought in World War II. In fact, it was while he was over there that the trajectory of his life that ends up with my dad and then domino effect me has to do with all of that. To know that people, even if I wasn't personally had a connection, just to know that people were killed in that way in the Holocaust, just for who they were. I mean, it's a weird statement. I'm sorry. Weird statement. I don't know if there's anything else in this clip. Let's continue a little bit, I guess.
And so the certain degree of it, to me, and maybe this isn't fair, comes off as self-righteousness. Like, you don't get to be madder at racists than me.
I mean, what is the point of this argument here? I'm struggling to understand it. What is, was this some sort of like competition? I mean, listen, there's certainly cases, like she was saying before, where white people can be very performative and act more outraged at instances of racism than perhaps a black person would, sure. I mean, if it's not performative, then that's good, though. Isn't that allyship? Allyship, I should say. But just I don't even know what to say here.
Now, if you are more angry than I am, that has to do with your personality, your own cognitive makeup, and you are entitled to that anger, right? But you have to understand that that's an individual. You are an individual operating as an individual, but you can't generalize about what we should do as a community based off of your personal predilections. Do you know what I'm saying?
No.
Sure.
No.
And so you are individually entitled
So she's basically saying that, like, you have personal issues if this is who you are, and that's your own personal problem. I don't understand that. I don't understand that. Just bizarre, bizarre. And when I was watching this clip, I thought, maybe she's not. Frankly, I think it's a lot easy. It could be, when you're in front of a camera, you can be saying something and think you're getting a point across, and it does not, you're hearing it correctly, but it comes out a different way. I think, you could, especially in live streams and stuff like that, on TV, you're a little bit more prepared for specifics, but something like this, you just, you flow, conversational. I get that there could be issues. But then when you have time to write something down, I am a little bit less open to that, because this is where the follow-up comes from. Someone points out that clip to her. Someone points out, oops, there we go. I grabbed the wrong camera. Someone pointed out how that's a bizarre take for a Jewish, on a Jewish person who lost family due to the Nazis. And then she posts this, though, for context about what she was saying. She said she misspoke when she said Nazis. And she meant white supremacists, which, doesn't really. And she tweets this. Let me put it over here. Nazis killed 6+ million Jews in the Holocaust. White supremacy is broader, and in this country, targets black people more specifically. I don't understand what she's going for here. I don't understand what the point is here. Our black people, every day, in their every day, do they experience more racism and more discrimination and prejudice? Sure. I don't think there's anyone who disagrees with that. That's why some Jews are able to benefit from white privilege, because they look or appear to be white. But the idea that she's putting forward is bizarre, because we're not talking about everyday discrimination or casual racism. We're talking Nazis and white supremacy, the movements themselves. We're not talking about like the overarching, white supremacy is really in the institutions, and of course that's an issue, but we are, in the context of this conversation, talking about legitimate 100%, white power, white supremacist, swastika, Sieg hailing, Hitler paraphernalia, neo-Nazis. This is what we're talking about. And I would not ever make the claim that one group is more despised as some sort of, because first of all, listen, every one of these white supremacists will have their own personal vendetta against the Pacific group especially. But from my own work over the years, I can tell you this much. And this is not to play this game here with Briahna. This is just factual basis. It is not to make the claim that one group is more hated than the other, because that's ridiculous. They hate them both. But a lot of white supremacists would like all the black people to just go somewhere else. They're not supposed to be here. That's how they view things. They're not supposed to be here. This is their land. Black people should go to Africa. White people get the white people countries. Their view on Jews, on the other hand, is that the Jewish people are the masterminds behind all this. They're the reason there are all these racial conflicts to begin with, because they are purposefully creating this conflict. If black people stayed where white supremacists think black people should stay, and white people stayed where white supremacists think white people should be, everything would be fine. Kumbaya. But the Jews, according to white supremacists, ruin that. So they often advocate for you gotta rid the earth of the Jewish people, because, as long as they're around, they're going to be creating this conflict for their own benefit. I mean, that's literally how they view how a good portion of them view their own ideological beliefs, where they come from. So it's a bizarre take. I mean, we heard white supremacists in this country marching in the streets saying Jews will not replace us. I mean, just bizarre. I'm sorry. I don't think this was well thought out. I'm not going to speculate at all the intent, because that's pointless. I think she's smarter than that take. Like I said, she's been on this show once before. I've disagreed with her more so than I ever have before over the past year, due to some of the takes she's had. But, I mean, bizarre. And I have the clip because I wasn't sure if I should tie it in, and I was going to not do it, but then I saw a few people in the YouTube chat bring it up. She went on the Hill. Briahna went on the Hill. Rising, that show, the online show from the Hill, to talk about the controversy. And I honestly think it went worse than anything else. It was just a mess. Let's watch it.
It is frustrating.
Not that clip. Where is this clip? Here it is.
Journalist, author, and leftist Twitter personality Talia Lavin joined Briahna Joy Gray's Bad Faith podcast this week in a conversation that went awry when the topic turned to deradicalization and coalition building with the far right. Here's some video of that.
Listen, like, I don't think that I'm going to be able to.
We already watched this. We don't need to replay that. We don't need to. Oh, there's a Glenn Greenwald tweet supporting her. Briahna. All right, let's just get to. Here we go.
Here to give her side of the story, Briahna, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So how how do you feel about being called
like, in one of the boxes,
a Nazi and all the?
I think that's a complete mischaracterization of how that interview went. We just watched it. Talia wasn't specifically calling Briahna a Nazi. She was saying anyone who believes that there's going to be some kumbaya moment to reach out and look at them as, doing the voice Talia did. Oh, they're just like us. They cook and they have families. I think that's who she meant. She was not specifically calling Briahna a Nazi.
Other things. I mean, what is your take on all of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately very unfortunate. I'm obviously
very humbled and grateful that so many interesting guests are willing to come on Bad Faith podcast and engage in good faith conversation with me there. I was really interested in talking to Talia because few people have had as much close proximity with people that are so radicalized and far right and extremist as she has. You know, her book and her project has been to infiltrate right-wing spaces online, including by making a dating profile on white.net and interacting with men on there for a year and a half. So my first question to her, it actually wasn't about deprogramming at all. I simply asked her as a leftist what that experience did to inform her confidence or pessimism about building broad coalitions, not with Nazis, of course, but how did it broadly inform her thoughts and feelings about how to coalition build among a broad multiracial coalition?
This is where the problem is. Like, even if you're having Talia on and you wanted to talk about deradicalization, I mean, sure. Okay, Talia don't want to talk about that, but deradicalization is a part of the conversation when it comes to white supremacists and far-right extremism, sure. But her insistence to focus on building a broad, multiracial leftist coalition, that has nothing to do with this. And by default, by constantly bringing it up, I mean, how else do you see? She just said, we're not supposed to, I'm not saying we do this with Nazis and white supremacists, but how do you view building a broad multiracial coalition while based on your work infiltrating Nazis and white supremacists? That doesn't make any sense. Who are you talking about then? Who are you talking about reaching out to build this broad multiracial coalition when you're constantly bringing it up in the context of neo-Nazis and white supremacists? Makes zero sense. And the fact that not one host here brings this up is a complete failure of all of them. What is with the fetish from this bizarre subsection of the left, which Briahna has hitched herself to? A lot of them are Jimmy Dore following people, that we must reach out to racists to build this multiracial coalition. As if no other white person exists. It is ridiculous. I'm sorry. It is ridiculous. It's so fucking stupid. And the obsession with it is just downright annoying.
Immediately pivoted the conversation to deprogramming, presumably because she's gotten a lot of questions about that before, and it became very defensive almost immediately. And I was curious about that, primarily because so often these conversations go off the rails because one party or the other accuses each other of anti-Semitism, of being a Nazi sympathizer, exactly the way it happened here. And I hoped that because I'm a Black American who obviously benefits not at all from the rise of Nazis, and that I argued is equally yoked insofar as my community and hers have a lot to lose from the rise of radical extremism, that we might be able to have a reasonable conversation that didn't default.
I mean, a major takeaway at the end of that interview from you in your post-game analysis was that it wasn't so equally yoked, right? Yoked. I like that word.
into this kind of identity essentialism. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think her behavior, she ended up making the worst possible case you could for the argument she was making. And we're not talking.
Again, if you're talking about her walking off the show, yeah, that was probably not the greatest move, not just for her, just in a general sense. Basic, television, etiquette and how you look and put yourself forward, sure. But substance-wise, I thought Talia was on point, to be quite frank, from what we watched for 20 plus minutes shortly, just a few minutes ago.
Behind her back, she's welcome, and I hope she does come here and discuss this with us. But she is essentially in the camp saying that it is fine to deny certain rights, free speech protections to the far right, to the extreme right, people engaged in far right activity. I always say, well, if you're going to have that standard, backtrack from the old ACLU standard that the Nazis should be able to march through Skokie, then you have to have a very clear definition of who actually is a Nazi and which rights we're taking away. At the very, I wouldn't support this, but this would be a way you'd have to go about doing it. And instead, she's expanding the definition.
I want to see what Briahna says to this first before I. That's Robbie Swove, or whatever his name is, works for Reason. He's libertarian. He's the guy who most recently gained some fame for tweeting that he was scootering on his little scooter. He was scooting to work and counting all the people wearing their masks outside in D.C. How ridiculous. Wearing masks during a pandemic outside. Who gives a shit? But, let's see. I want to see what Briahna has to say, because I don't really care about it coming from him.
Who is a Nazi to include you, and saying the rights that should be taken away include they should be met with explicit violence. So I feel like she is undermining any plausible case you could make for she's not strongmanning the Antifa position, is she?
Yeah, the Skokie example is important because the argument that ACLU is making there is not that Nazis are good and should be defended or that there is any value necessarily to their speech, but part of the principle is that it is so difficult to discern whose speech should and should not be abridged, right? Whose rights shouldn't be taken away, and who's going to be the arbiter of that. And it's particularly concerning that Talia showed a lack of humility in that regard because, and I don't bring this up because I have any interest in, digging in on this point or highlighting a mistake. A lot of people make mistakes, but she is kind of known for having been let go from the New Yorker as a fact check.
Whoa, I'll get there in a second, but what the fuck? This has nothing to do with the conversation Talia had. Listen, I don't know Talia's position on this, but in the 20-plus minute Bad Faith podcast interview we just listened to between Briahna and Talia, there was zero discussion of state-sanctioned action against anybody. And here they are talking about that. The belief that anti-fascist action sometimes, many times, sometimes must get violent too, as part of that action, has zero to do with neo-Nazi or white supremacist rights as sanctioned by the government. I don't know where Talia stands on this. Would not surprise me at all if she stands where most anti-fascists stand, and that's keep the state out of this. Who's bringing up that at all? Talia said she thinks the best way to fight the far right, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, is for mass movements in the streets, anti-fascist movements in the streets, a communal effort of anti-fascists coming together to meet neo-Nazis and white supremacists where they go and to make life miserable for them. Where does the federal government, the state, fall into this at all? Yet this is the discussion they're having. Which speech should be considered hate speech? When is free speech not so free? Whose rights should we... How far right do you have to be? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Who are you? I'm, this is worse than any of it, honestly. The Talia Briahna interview, I thought was, it was a little bit heated at times, but it was an overall cordial conversation, and I thought it was a good conversation. The selling of the podcast afterwards online, the promotion of it, hammed up the controversial aspects of it and honed in on the controversy to get people to listen. Sure, that was uncouth in some aspects, but other aspects, I get why you would do that. The post-game breakdown on bad faith from Briahna, where she didn't understand why Talia would be as mad at Nazis as a Jewish woman as she would. I thought that was not good, pretty bad. But this is just not even the conversation. This is taking other people's words and this is like copying and pasting person A's words and attributing it to person B.
Because she
let's go back here. Holy shit. I was not expecting this, to be honest. I didn't watch the whole Hill thing in advance. Jesus Christ.
That Talia showed a lack of humility in that regard because, and I don't bring this up because I have any interest in, digging in on this point or highlighting a mistake. A lot of people make mistakes, but she is kind of known for having been let go from the New Yorker as a fact checker because she misidentified an ICE officer as having a white supremacist tattoo that in fact was not a white supremacist tattoo. Ending up targeting that person for what ultimately ended up being unjustified hate and attack, right? So if you have already made a mistake like that in your personal life as a fact checker at a prestigious institution, one might think you would have a little humility before going around saying that folks need to be deplatformed, et cetera. And in fact, in the context of our conversation, she admitted that deplatforming would ultimately disproportionately affect the left. She completely conceded that point.
If Talia said that, I'm not going to even touch the New Yorker thing. That's fucking, honestly, in my estimation, gross. It's gross. Talia made a mistake. It was a big mistake. Yes. She paid the price for it. In fact, she was harassed by right-wingers over it. Far beyond anything that happened to the individual whose tattoos she misidentified. She lost her job. And, she faced the consequences for that mistake. I don't know why you would go there. Honestly. Yeah, there's zero relevance here. Because Talia is not calling for any sort of state action against these people, as far as I know. But let's continue. Let's continue here.
Hurt the left more than the right.
Oh yeah, the deplatforming thing. Don't want to forget about that. If Talia has that point of view, like Bree says, Talia is wrong as well. Because this is just, I just hate this conversation. This is coming from someone who was just demonetized by YouTube. So you think if I really wanted to ham it up, I mean, I could probably, if I really wanted to go that route, this is the perfect opening for me to go, I'm being censored by YouTube. I'm help me. I'm being deplatformed and censorship and subscribe to my Substack or my YouTube. You can if I'm demonetized. My Patreon, my Rumble. I'm going to Rumble. Sign me up for BitChute and Parler. There is zero proof or evidence that any action taken against the far right leads to any effect on the left. In fact, this is not even a chicken or the egg scenario if you're questioning it. Leftist content has always had issues well before the right-wing content. There is a much larger online viewership for right-wing content. Historically, right-wing content has made much more money online, which makes right-wing content much more liked in certain aspects by various parties in terms of companies, algorithms made by certain companies. It gets better engagement, gets more viewership, better hits, traffic, shares, whatever the metric is, right-wing content has always done better. There is little to no money in left-wing content, to be quite frank. The few that have made large full-time livings from left-wing content are truly enigmas. It is, and for as long as there can be, when it became time to take action against political content, left-wing content was the easiest to take action against. No revenue loss, really. Advertisers tend to want to stay away from politics in general. Left-wing content, even, think about the earliest days of the internet, who was president, George Bush. Left-wing content was not treated nicely in general. So imagine how it was looked at online. So the idea that there would be some sort of domino effect for left-wing content, not true. Second of all, I don't know of any major left-wing creator who's been completely deplatformed as a result of the recent deplatforming of major far-right personalities and actors like Alex Jones, Milo Yiannopoulos, Baked Alaska, Nick Fuentes. If you know of a left-wing creator who has been completely barred as a result, please let me know, because I don't know any. I deplore this argument, and you see it all the time from contrarians who really their point is they just don't want right-wing content where their viewership comes from to lose its place as number one on the internet. I mean, it's just not true. You want to know the number one issue facing left-wing creators online? It's copyright. Copyright issues. From legit copyright holders who are overzealously knocking down things that are actually 100% fair use, or from scammers and bullshit artists who are copyright IDing content they don't even own. And then also automated algorithm systems, like what happened to me, that basically misreads channels that are not derelict to the YouTube policies as breaking those policies. And because they're a smaller channel, YouTube just doesn't get around to fixing it right away. So, I mean, the idea that anti-left censorship is not an issue, a major issue to me.
She decided that was okay. And a fine consequence, I guess, if it met the ultimate ends. And as someone who is only able to support herself, frankly, after having been marginalized by the mainstream news media for having progressive values, by having an independent platform and a site like Patreon, I think it's really concerning to see her willingness to take such draconian action without even giving some thought into what the kind of metrics would be for that kind of attack on free speech.
Well, Patreon is the payment platform. There is, I mean, first of all, the free speech is nothing to do with deplatforming on private networks. There is no free speech issue with a company like Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or Rumble or Parler or Getter, the right-wing networks. There is no free speech issue with them deciding, hey, I own this platform. I run this platform. I do not want this specific type of thing on my platform. It's my business choice. It's my personal choice, whatever it may be. There's no free speech issue there. Those who try to make one are wrong, but it is even more ridiculous when you try to make that issue for a payment platform. Because if you even want to falsely argue that because there are free speech rights, that they should be wrongly rolled out for private platforms, there is zero rights to monetization of your content. I'm sorry. From others, I should say. I mean, obviously, if you want to monetize your content, you want to reach out to advertisers and make your own private deals, whatever, you have the right to do that if you want. They have no right to advertise on your shit. YouTube has no right to monetize my content. I have no right to YouTube monetizing my content. If YouTube decides not to remonetize me now after I've been demonetized, from what my estimation is a mistake with their system, that's it. They don't have to. I could complain. I probably would, just to see what I can do to push them to reverse it. But I would never claim that my rights are being trampled on, because they're not. This is a customer service issue, to be quite clear. This is not a rights issue. I mean, that's really what the majority of the rights problems are when it comes to like these like free speech tech issues, where what they at least classify as free speech, online platform tech issues, big tech issues. Their problem is customer service related, not rights related.
What I found most disturbing or interesting about this entire episode was that there seems to be a large portion of people online who subscribe to the idea that this entire conversation actually should not have taken place, and that is not just a legitimate but almost a dominant perspective. That
now, this is Ryan Grimm, who is the left-leaning person on this platform. I like Ryan. He is a fellow Jimmy Dore critic. He shouted me out on an episode of The Hill over the past few weeks ago when I pointed out the bizarre fake news that was being spread by the Jimmy Dore left about AOC owning the restaurant she worked at. Completely false. Bizarre claim, but also completely false. I don't know anybody who said this conversation should not have happened. I know people criticized Bree's way of going about it. They criticized things she said. They criticized her insistence to focus on things after her guest made it clear that they didn't want to talk about certain issues. I mean, she doesn't have to agree, but I didn't see anyone say this conversation should not have happened.
there was something inherently wrong with even discussing this.
Didn't see any of that.
Oftentimes, Briahna, I think when you get into kind of Twitter kerfuffles, you know what you're getting into. Like you're.
Sure.
But this one, I'm curious if you did or not, or if you were kind of blindsided by the reaction to it.
Yeah, it is interesting. I reached out to Talia because I hadn't actually read her book when I reached out. I did, obviously, before our interview. But what attracted me to her was that she demonstrates a willingness to kind of live her life out loud and be vulnerable publicly online, which I honestly have a lot of empathy for. And I think it takes a lot of courage because I know firsthand how aggressive and unpleasant it can be to be a human being on the internet. And I thought that because of the vulnerability that she displayed online, she might be willing to get into some of these trickier conversations and might trust me because I'm a Black woman, because we've worked in similar spaces on the internet, to kind of open the door to some questions which I genuinely am wrestling with and find genuinely difficult. I did not expect her to walk out of the interview. That's never happened to me before. It certainly wasn't a contentious conversation on my end. It was very mellow. I think people who go and on Patreon and subscribe and listen to the whole thing will find themselves kind of surprised by the difference between the energy on the internet and the energy in the interview. And then there's another level of conversation where a lot of people seem to think that I should not have aired the interview at all because she walked off of it, which is not, I don't know how interviews work, I'm afraid, especially since we didn't have an opportunity to reshoot the podcast because we had originally scheduled the podcast for Friday. She ended up being an hour late for it. And when she showed up, she was in a car on her phone and not prepared to do the interview. Fine. We rescheduled for Sunday. And then this happened. And this
I don't, again, listen, I've had guests do bizarre, I'm using that word a lot today, bizarre things with lateness, and luckily not too late, but it just happened. When I was at the majority report, you should see what some of these guests, sometimes not showing up at all with no pre-warning or canceling at the absolute last minute, i.e. like minutes into when they should have been on. Listen, it happens. I would never specifically talk about this stuff on air. Why? It makes no sense. What is the purpose? I think it's extremely unprofessional to do that when you're a guest on someone's show. I think it is extremely unprofessional to do that, that being what Bree's doing right now as the host of a show. I would never specifically go after someone for some sort of issue like that. Just makes no sense. What is going on here?
For a Monday airing. So I obviously regret this. I invited her back on after she walked off the podcast to do a proper closing. We could have edited out that she walked out at all and finished the conversation. She declined to do so. I made my apologies in private, as you can see in the DMs that she shared. I think unethically. I won't be sharing any of her DMs that would flesh out the conversation even further. And frankly, I think not quite be so flattering. But ultimately, at the end of the day, she declined any of my offers and took to the internet the next day instead to smear me as a Nazi sympathizer. So,
again, the mischaracterization of that, just not what Talia said. I'm sorry.
It's not ideal. I hope that she will come back on the show and talk things out because I would prefer not to have this kind of adversarial relationship with anybody. And I want our guests to always know that they're going to be treated fairly and graciously, but you can't win them all.
It's really interesting because, this really does highlight this conversation you had. It highlights this cancel culture sort of on the left where, if you're not in line, then you just get demonized. You yourself are part of the other team. You're far right. You're on the right. You're a right winger because you don't completely align with me ideologically.
What? Cancel culture? What are you talking about? What? Who was canceling anybody over this?
And it's interesting because I don't know if this sort of thing happens on the right. Maybe Robbie could actually kind of clue us into this a little bit more, but I don't know. Is there this sort of cancel culture where it's like, you're not right wing enough for us, or you're not supportive of whoever?
This person hosts a political show? Doesn't know if there's right wing infighting? Are you serious? Are you kidding me?
Say anything untoward about President Trump. You could defend every policy and everything he's ever done, but if you deny that he is the literal reincarnation of our Savior, you can face that. So no, this is a sad reality of the tribal time we live in, that there is an unhealthy dialogue on both sides of the political spectrum, both far sides, and then of course in the middle, a middle that is often ignoring some of the more valid points that arise on on both the sides. Thank you so much for being with us, Briahna. We really appreciate you talking about this. And again, just to be very clear, we would love to have Talia come here too and talk. We're not, this is an important conversation to have, and she should absolutely be able to share her perspective as well. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just, I don't understand. I guess I'm just not built for the new influencer political world where everything is, you saw that, I don't know if you guys saw that story recently where some mommy vlogger with over 500,000 subscribers on YouTube, it was her full-time job, and she accidentally uploaded a video where she apparently their dog had just been found to have this this horrible disease, and they were filming their family life finding this out for their channel, and she's in the car with her child, her son, and he's crying because they just found this out, and she holds him close to her and starts coaching her on how to cry, coaching her son how to cry for the camera to get like a good YouTube thumbnail. And he's like, but mommy, I'm really crying. I'm really sad about what just happened. And she's like, no, but just, hold your mouth like this. Hold your hand like this to your mouth. Hold, for the camera. You need to make it look good for the camera. And she accidentally uploaded that version of the clip so everyone could see it. And she received big backlash or whatever. But, that's what all these mommy vloggers and YouTubers and influencers who do that shit do. That's not something unique just to her. But I'm bringing that up because, this is what this seems like to me, honestly. This is what this is all coming to. I mean, I don't see how else it could be described other than like Bree was talking about performative anger over racism. This is all just super performative to me. And I say this as someone who, has no strong feelings on any of the individuals involved. I've had Bree on this show. I'd have her on this show again. I'd be happy to go on bad faith if she wanted me to have a discussion. But this is all so ginned up controversy for the point of subscribers and views and patrons, and it's fucking ridiculous to me. I can't do it. I can't do that. If that means I won't be a successful streamer or podcaster, then so be it. I just can't do it. And this isn't just Brie. I just don't see what any of what we just listened to in this Rising clip had to do with politics whatsoever. It wasn't even drama that happened on the show as a result of a disagreement about politics. Because we saw on the show the disagreement about politics wasn't even that heated on air. Because, you could say that, yes, Talia was upset about the deradicalization conversation, but the real crux of the issue afterwards was that there was this behind-the-scenes brouhaha, right? You were late to the show. You filmed in your car. I asked you not to air it, and you did. You walked off the show. I walked off the show. I'm being fair here too. I think, Talia wasn't, could have, handled a little bit better to make herself look better, especially being that I thought she was super astute with what she was actually saying substance-wise. I mean, it's just, pointless. 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 And over what? Over what? Like, this isn't like, even like, you have some, I play a Dave Rubin clip. I play a Michael Tracy speaking at a college to people heckling him clip. This isn't like some silly shit we're mocking and making fun of because that person is our political enemy and we are against that person or whatever because they are a horrible individual. This is basically a petty fight between two people who broadly have the same overarching politics, who disagree with actions and activism. Who then somehow pivot into a feud over podcast etiquette. It's so stupid. And again, this last point I'm making here isn't specific to Brie at all. It's just, it's fucking, I'm not interested in it. I'm just not interested in it. Here, let's talk about this. Let me grab a picture of it. Let's talk about this. Because this is another thing that I really couldn't fucking... Give me 1 second. Just grab this photo. Okay. So by now, you've probably heard about the whole controversy, all the talk online about AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, representative, House rep from New York, district over from mine. She went to the Met Gala a couple nights ago, and she was wearing this dress. Let me pull the picture up on here. Tax the rich. Received a lot of criticism for going to the Met Gala. It's basically this over-the-top, super fancy event at the Met in New York. All these celebrities go. It's a big fashion event. Tickets, I believe, are $35,000 or something like that. AOC did not pay $35,000 for a ticket. I see people also saying, as a fashion designer, when you're invited by a fashion designer, which AOC was, she was invited by the woman who's standing next to her who made that dress. They invite a guest, and that guest wears their article of clothing that they made, and they get to go for free. I don't know all the details of how AOC went, but I can tell you that pretty much every New York politician, even city council people, Mayor Bill de Blasio was there, I believe. He's invited for sure. City council people are to go to that thing. Then they're not invited by fashion designers to make a splash because no one barely fucking pays attention to who they are to begin with. Sadly, obviously, in terms of their day job of being a New York City council person. But it's just not. I don't even think. I think politicians are invited by the sense of them being New York politicians, and they want them there. Public figures get invited to all sorts of events for free, so they can go. But there was this whole big backlash over her showing up. And let me tell you what my point is, what my take is, okay? I really don't give a shit. Who cares? Who fucking cares? Like, who gives a shit? This is such a stupid fucking conversation to even be having. Is the Met Gala gross? Of course it is. Any event where rich people show up and flaunt their largesse and, you know, attend a event that basically says you're not in the in crowd and you're not a VIP and you're not wealthy enough or you're not cool enough. All that shit is gross. But who fucking cares? This shit happens all the time. There's probably 1,000 events per night you don't even fucking know about. You know how many, like, big corporate CEOs are probably meeting in each other's dining rooms every night that you're not privy to while they discuss how to fuck over their workers? Who gives a shit? Who fucking cares? Is it bad optics for AOC to show up? I don't care. I mean, frankly, sure, I agree with that. I could agree with anyone who wants to make that point. Am I going to personally make that point? No, because I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. I don't care. It's such a non-important event. Personally, I think any event like that is gross, but especially amid the pandemic. But it just does not mean enough to me to fucking waste any time on making it an issue. I mean, frankly, the pandemic, if anything, has really, you probably have noticed over the past like year and a half where my priorities have lied and where there's just shit I don't care about anymore. 1 in 500 people in the United States has died due to the COVID-19 pandemic. One in 500 people. I mean, AOC showing up at this event is just not something I care to fucking waste time on. Bad optics? Sure. Should she have gone? If I was invited, I probably would not go. If I did, my statement would be a little bit more than a dress. I'll tell you that much. I don't mean a dress, specifically a dress. I mean the way I dress. I would probably do something to never get invited to the event again, to be quite frank, if you're really going to disrupt an event. But I probably wouldn't even bother going. I just don't think it's enough to warrant any of this critique, any of the opinion on it is just enough to warrant any sort of caring. So let's not waste any more time on this ridiculousness. Frankly, I find what AOC does outside of attending the Met Gala much more relevant to my interests. And from what I've seen, she is a good congresswoman. I mean, this is just, I bring this. I wasn't even thinking about talking about the AOC Met Gala thing because that's how much I fucking don't care about it. But this whole discussion that we were having, where it seemed like the perfect segue to bring it up as a recent example of like this whole like influencer left politics as online influencer culture. I just don't have any care for it. I just don't fucking care, man. All right. Let's do this now, and then I guess that'll be the show, So Speaking of celebrity, and I bring this up because this is relevant. It's not just like some like lame ass celebrity drama or some shit. But speaking of celebrity, Nicki Minaj is out there with the tweet of the week, maybe the tweet of the month, if not year. So Nicki Minaj says how she has no interest in getting vaccinated for the Met Gala, so she wasn't going. So Nicki Minaj not vaccinated. Not the smartest thing to say to your, I don't even know how many millions and millions. I'm going to say tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of online followers. But then she digs in. People start criticizing her because she says how she's going to do her own research before deciding to get any vaccine. Again, unclear what anyone's own research means. Is Nicki Minaj going to rent out a laboratory and hire some scientists and put on her goggles and get down to work with them as they run some experiments and tests on COVID vaccines? If that's what her research is, I guess I could respect that, and please publish your results. I look forward to seeing it. But I don't think that's what she means. By doing her own research, she means not listening to the very people who did do the scientific legwork and instead relying on watching a few fucking YouTube videos and some Facebook memes that were shared to her newsfeed. Ridiculous. But she continued to double down when people started to criticize her for this. And then she has the take of the century, the take of the month. Maybe century is going too far, but the take of the month at least. One that has gotten lots of play on Fox News and also resulted in one of the funniest Tucker Carlson lower thirds I've ever seen in my life. Here is a still from the Tucker Carlson show with that Nicki Minaj tweet. So Nicki Minaj says, "My cousin in Trinidad won't get the vaccine because his friend got it and became impotent. His testicles became swollen. His friend was weeks away from getting married. Now the girl called off the wedding. So just pray on it and make sure you're comfortable with your decision, not bullied." And Tucker Carlson, full on board the Nicki Minaj train, loves her now, obviously, and his producers with the ultimate Chiron, Nicki Minaj. Cousin's testicles became swollen. Breaking news, folks. Breaking news. Nicki Minaj's cousin's testicles became swollen, which, by the way, is an inaccurate headline because Minaj didn't say her cousin's testicles became swollen. Minaj clearly said, my cousin's friend, got the vaccine and their testicles became swollen. So it was Nicki Minaj's cousin's friend. You know how this goes. Obviously, you should always trust that, that grapevine, that like game of telephone, right? You should always trust whenever you hear a story that comes from, my friends, brothers, relatives, cousins, uncles, goats, dogs, horses, brothers, cousins, third cousin twice removed, uncles, gay lovers, friends, brothers, mothers, fathers, grandfathers, great grandmas, friends, brothers, cousins, donkeys, sister. That always works out to be a good, truthful, legitimate story, right? So Nicki Minaj doubling down. She ends up sharing a Tucker Carlson segment, by the way. And apparently she's getting into a fight with Hassan, leftist Twitch streamer, who tweeted at her about how ridiculous she's being, sharing Fox News stuff just because they're agreeing with her. I should point out, Nicki Minaj always been bad when it comes to politics. When Cardi B famously came out and endorsed Cynthia Nixon and Jumaane Williams for governor and lieutenant governor. Nicki Minaj followed up with a tweet endorsing Andrew Cuomo for governor, which we all know was an astute political observation now in the present day, September 2021, mere weeks removed from Governor Andrew Cuomo resigning due to a sexual harassment scandal, also followed by one that also followed a nursing home death scandal. So, Nicki Minaj has always been on the pulse of the right point here. Now, I would like to say that this is not true. I mean, we don't need to reach out to Nicki Minaj's cousin or Nicki Minaj's cousin's friend or the uncles, brothers, goats, dogs, sisters, lovers, brothers, sisters, great grandma. We don't got to do any of that. There's been zero proof that swollen balls is a reaction or a side effect of any of the COVID-19 vaccines, Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, where I guess it would make sense even if you're, because, it's in the name twice, so I guess it would make sense if that one gave you twice the size. But there is just nothing. And don't just take it from American health officials. The fact that Nicki Minaj brought up Trinidad, because that's where her cousin's friend ostensibly is from, being that her cousin's there. The Trinidad health minister, because of Nicki Minaj's ridiculously irresponsible tweet, they also had to come out and set the record straight. Here that is from, I believe today, maybe yesterday, but from the past couple of days.
Yes, so claims are being made. One of the reasons we could not respond yesterday in real time to Ms. Minaj is that we had to check and make sure that what she was claiming was either true or false. And unfortunately, we wasted so much time yesterday running down this false claim. It is, as far as we know, at this point in time, there has been no such reported either side effect or adverse event. And what was sad about this is that it wasted our time yesterday trying to track down, because we take all these claims seriously, whether it's on social media or mainstream media. As we stand now, there is absolutely no reported such side effect or adverse event of testicular swelling in Trinidad, or I dare say, Dr. Hines, anywhere else? None that we know of anywhere else in the world. So that's a claim.
And, I don't know how well American media has been covering this. I know Fox News has gone balls to the walls with Nicki Minaj coverage. But I did come across this coverage from Trinidad media, which I gotta say, they're completely hitting this as good as they. I mean, this is. I'm just gonna play it for you because this is really, really effective reporting on this whole ridiculousness. Because again, this isn't just stupid celebrity drama. This is an extremely high level celebrity who has massive influence, hundreds of millions of fans, who is spreading dangerous misinformation.
Story, this one dropped yesterday morning. And as the story dropped, it was excitement. Now, Nicki Minaj no stranger to controversy. I mean, she was here for Carnival in 2020, and that was a bacchanal with her husband, now husband, and Iowa. She would have made some outlandish statements over the years, but this one takes the cake. This is almost like what you would hear by a parlor, where somebody will tell you, well, their cousin, friend, neighbor, say XYZ. I mean, come on.
You're doing my bit.
Nikki, you have 180 million followers. People listen to you. People follow your particular lead. You going on the social media space and talking about your cousin friend take the vaccine and get impotent. And all of a sudden, marriage call off and some kind of bacchanal story. I mean, it's irresponsible on all fronts. One, irresponsible based on the misinformation that is going out there regarding this vaccine. There was no verification of the story. And furthermore, even on a personal note, even if this is the case, to expose your cousin friend's flat tire in the public domain like that. If the man have a flat tire, okay, he will work on that. There's herbs and punch and certain things the man can eat and bring back our vibes. But don't come now and talk that kind of talk. The thing gets so hot. Jake Tapper on CNN yesterday at 4 o'clock talk about this with Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci is, of course, the U.S. That's their leading mind and specialist with this whole COVID-19 pushback and the fight against the COVID-19. And Dr. Fauci had to almost, like the man was blindsided. He had to answer. And he said he didn't hold nothing personal against Nikki. I mean, I don't think we should per se, but Nikki, better than that. I honestly expected better. And besides, obviously, that outlandish statement, and she always talks about Trinidad, and she's from Trinidad, she's yet to collaborate with somebody from here. But that's a talk for another program on another day.
I love that last bit. Well, the flat tire thing is great. First of all, he's like, listen, even if Nicki Minaj's cousin, this did happen to him, how could you put him on blast? It's cousin's friend. But that I love the jab, the needle in the arm, if you can say the needling in the arm from him about her always name dropping Trinidad, but never collaborating with an artist from there. I know that. Feeling very well. Name droppers who, well, that's another. It's another, like you said, that's another story for another day. But yeah, I mean, this whole thing's ridiculous, and eventually someone's gonna find her cousin, and then her cousin's friend. It's gonna all, obviously, that's where this story goes next, right? I guess we'll see. But I want to make sure. 100% accurate to anyone watching. Don't want any confusion. If you're not already vaccinated, you should get vaccinated. And you should not worry about your balls getting swollen. I mean, listen, I got vaccinated. I got my 2 doses, fully vaccinated. And my balls are already just as large, or still, I should say, I guess, just as large as they always have been. Stupid. They're not any bigger than they were. Damn. I mean, this whole, what's going on? I did think about that great AC/DC song, though. It was Balls Mahoney from ECW's old theme song. I've got big balls, and he's got big balls, and she's got big balls, and they've got big balls. But we've got the biggest balls of them all. Great song, by the way. Great theme song, too, for a guy named Balls Mahoney. Rest in peace. All right, you know what? What time is it? Oh, it's late. I gotta jump. I gotta jump. Folks, that is the show for today. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Reminder, no show tomorrow. Tomorrow, Thursday, the usual time I do shows. Ooh, excuse me. No show tomorrow. We'll be back with more soon. We'll be back the regular Thursday a week from tomorrow, and possibly more additional days as well. We'll probably do a movie watching show soon. Again, this channel is currently demonetized. 0 super chats came in today. So if you can support this show by going to patreon.com/mattbinder and subscribing there, I would greatly appreciate it. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, twitter.com/mattbinder, twitch.tv/mattbinder, youtube.com/mattbinder. ratethispodcast.com/doomed to leave podcast reviews. Folks, see you all next time on Doomed.